to 6. So you have 17 students on board. Okay, so I think that we might need to start now. I will start with the final lesson before I tune in and try to unpack the requirements of the final assignment. Yeah, so in the meantime, I would like to wait for the latecomers as a while. They might have some kind of confusion about the final assignment, and this kind of confusion cannot be resolved by me. Yeah. So the final lesson today is going to focus on interpreting scores. We have already learned how to design some kind of assessment practice for vocabulary, grammar, listening, speaking, writing, and reading. And we have already validated the test validation already. And at the same time now, we come to the final stage. It's about how to interpret the score and how to give the feedback, feed forward, and feed now for the student in order to help them to learn better. So the final lesson is gonna be the moment in which you're gonna see the nexus between teaching and assessing. Okay. So the first thing I would like you to spend some time on in the lesson today is about this question. Okay, so can score speak? And if yes, what kind of story that you can learn from scores?
Excuse me, teacher. We can't see your slide.
Oh, really? Sorry. Okay. Can you see it now?
Yes, it's clear now.
Okay, so thank you very much. Okay, so I would like to start the lesson with a very critical questions over here. Can score speak? And if you answer yes, so what kind of story that you can learn from the score? Yes, the score here is going to be some kind of test scores, I guess. Okay. So can score speak? And if yes, what kind of story that score can tell you? Wang Li or Wang Li?
Yes.
Okay. So what is your opinion about this questions over here?
Oh, I think my answer is yes, because when we see the score, we can see the improvement of the student.
Good.
Yeah.
And what?
Excuse me? Can you hear me?
Yeah. So apart from the improvement of the student, what else we can see from the score?
I just think about the improvement.
Okay, so thank you. And what?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that other than the improvement of the student, we can look back on the program teaching curriculum that we have used, and also we can look back on the materials, the like the method of teaching, and many things else, whether they are suitable for the student, whether they are suitable for the level of the student or not. So that what the score can tell us.
Very good. Okay, very good. So it's gonna be a very easy yes to the questions over here. And in fact, the score, or to be more precise, the assessment score or the testing scores can tell different kind of stories. They can tell the stories about the language ability of a particular learner. As you said, okay, so whether students have already achieved or mastered all the learning goals of the given course, or whether we can see some kind of improvement from the first test to the second test and to the final test as well. Not only about the language ability of a particular learner, we can also see the language ability of a group of learners. Having that said, I can say that based on the given score, I can make some kind of cross comparison between the performance of student to another one. And as you said already, we can look back at the quality of teachings. And here we can have some kind of information, a very insightful information about our teaching practices, including the curriculum, the programs, the teaching materials, teaching method, and other resources as well. And finally, score can also tell different kind of story about the quality of the assessment itself, whether this kind of assessment can be suitable for the student, whether this kind of assessment can be valid and reliable in its own self. So actually, we can tell different stories from the scores themselves. Yeah, so we can tell about the learner, we can tell about the group of learners, we can tell about our teaching practices, and we can also tell about our assessment practices as well. And yeah, so you have learned about the marking rubric already, and by the marking rubric, we can know what the student can do, what they cannot do now, and what might be the future action that we can do with a particular learner. Okay. Yeah. So now I would like to, yeah.
Sorry, can you go back a little bit at the last slide you showed before you come to this one?
Yeah,
Okay.
this one.
Yeah, this one. Yes.
Yeah, so this one is going to be the story about the language ability of a particular learner.
Okay.
So this one, we can see the score, for example, here. And after that, what can the student do? And what cannot they do up to now? And what might be the action in order to improve the learning process and learning quality as well? Yeah, so that is going to be the story the score can tell us about the student. And yeah, so in order to unpack more about it, I would like you to come back to one of the very important concepts that you have learned right from the first lesson of this course about measurement. Yeah. So can you please tell me what does this mean for measurement? You have learned this concept right from the first lesson of this course already. Okay, so anybody who can help me by defining this concept? I can still remember and vividly recall what you have learned in the first lesson with me face to face on campus. And we learn about several key concepts that we are supposed to use throughout the course over here. And one of them is measurement. So what does this mean for measurement?
I think here is referred to actions of comparing and contrasting their student progress or ability.
Yeah, but actually, it's just some kind of byproduct of this kind of measurement, because the main purpose of the measurement is not only to compare and contrast the performance of one student to another within one group or between groups of the student altogether. The main purpose of the measurement is gonna be the process of assigning
to assign a number to students' performance.
Yeah, meaningful number to a yeah, so it's going to be process of assigning a meaningful number to a performance. Yeah, to that performance. Yeah, you have learned this kind of concept already. And my question is, what does this mean for meaningful over here? Yeah, so number is quite clear already. In this very case, number refers to the scores or the grades or some kind of labels. And what does this mean for meaningful here?
I think that meaningful score means that the score can evaluate the best performance of the student
can reflect the best performance of it.
Okay, yeah. So the score can reflect or can tell us about the ability of the student, or the score has some kind of story to tell. And in other words, the score, yeah, has its own meaning. And because the score has its own meaning, so I say the score is meaningful. Okay, so what is the meaning of the score? Now, for example, I say that this student achieved A1 level in terms of writing. What does this mean for this? What he or she can do and what he or she cannot do. Yeah, can you remember? Okay, so here, for example, when I say that the student have A2 level in terms of writing, yeah, so for example, they can be able to write a detailed description of people and activities in a particular event. So that is the meaning of the score. Or for example, when I say that the student have A1 level in terms of reading, so they are able to identify the core meaning of a given sentence on a particular familiar topic. So it's gonna be the meaning of the score. So if you go back to the CEFR, yeah, band description. So the description is gonna be the meaning of each level, and the same holds true for the case of IELTS. For every single band on IELTS score, we have some kind of description, and this kind of description is gonna be the meaning of the score itself. Okay, now another question that I would like you to have here is that beyond the score, we know about the ability of the student, we know about the hidden story behind it. And from that, we can give some kind of comment, feedback, feed forward. Yeah. So I would like to come back to the questions over here. What might be the differences between comment, feedback, feed now, feed forward? Yeah. So are they the same or different? Yeah, so I used to ask this kind of question one or twice during the courses already, and I do hope that you can still remember it. Okay. So are they the same or different in terms of insights and definitions?
Actually, they are different.
Yeah, so tell me, how are they different from one to another?
The command is a general, it includes the feedback, feed now, and feed forward. So feedback, feed now, and feed forward belong to the command. And feedback is the commands that regarding their past performance.
Mm-hmm. Very
So already
good.
they gave the performance and then you give the feedback for them. Feed now is why they are delivering their, for example, the presentation or their performance. You give them the commands for them to know what to do right now at that moment. And feed forward is what should they do in the future for the next performance.
Very good. Yeah. So that is the stories that we can tell with the students themselves. Okay. So from that, I would like to link between the three main components in order to build up the story for about the language ability of a particular learner. Yeah. So the story is going to be something that we should have here. The first one is about their scores. The second one is about the meaning of the scores. And after that, we have some kind of comments. Yeah. So the stories that we can learn from the score is going to be something like this one. Yeah. So from the given score, we can learn about the meaning or the description of the score. And with this kind of score, what we can imply about their second language ability. And from that, what kind of comments, what kind of feedback, what kind of feed now, and what kind of feed forward we can give to the student. And that is the things that we need to have here about a single and individual learner. Yeah. And let me move on with the second one. Yeah. Okay, so when in your actual practice, sometimes you need to give the meaning. You need to describe the meaning of the score to learners. How can you do this? How can you do this? Yeah, so you score the paper already, and it's going to be the time for you to report the score back to the student. And sometimes for young learners, you might need to report this kind of score to their parents as well. So how can you report this kind of scores? Yeah, we know that we have to tell some kind of story from the score, right? We know that we need to state the score and the meaning. Yeah, so how can you tell the meaning of the score to the students themselves and to their parents, especially in case when the students are young learners? Okay. So-
Can we based on the marking rubrics?
Very good. We need to base ourselves on the marking rubrics. And from that, we can tell them about the meaning of the score. For example, here it's going to be the marking rubric. It's not about the marking rubric, but it's going to be different kind of levels. So the best way for you to do is that you go back to the test specification. In the test specification, we have the test goal. Yeah, and we can identify the level and the competences that associated with this kind of level. Yeah, for example, in this kind of final test over here, the students are required to do different kind of section altogether. They are required to do some kind of listening, reading, writing, speaking together with some kind of interaction and vocabulary. And for each section, we have some kind of levels that are associated with different kind of competences over here. Okay, and we go back to this kind of purpose of the assessment first. And after that, we have to base ourselves on the mastery cutoff point. Yeah, so what does this mean for mastery cutoff point? Yeah. Okay, so for example, for A1 level of listening, what does this mean for mastery cutoff point over here? Yeah. Yeah, for example, like for the listening competences number 1, I have 5 items in the test. And the score weight for this 5 items is 10. If my student have only 5 correct answers, what can I say to them? If my student have 8 correct answers, what can I say to them? If my student have only 7 correct answers, what can I say to them? Okay, so the second thing that we need to look back is about the mastery cutoff point. Mastery cutoff point is going to be the ways that we try to select enough evidence to show that the student have already achieved the target level. Like in this case over here, we have a range of competences. We have 3 competences for listening. We have another 3 competences for reading. We have 2 competences for speaking. We have 1 competence for interaction and another competence for writing. And here is going to be the maximum score. But of course, we cannot expect them to achieve the maximum score for everything. So we need to have some kind of cut-off point for their mastery level. So after they have already achieved this kind of score, it means that they are able to achieve this kind of level already. For example, in order to bring enough evidence to say that the students have already mastered the competences, number 1 for listening, so they need to have 8 correct answers. 8 points or 4 correct answers out of 5 test items over here. Okay, so if my student achieve, for example, like 8 points out of 10, I say that the student have already mastered A1 level for this competence. So that is the evidence. Okay, and here from this kind of mastery cut-off point in the test specification, that is going to be the key things that we need to look back in order to give the feedback, feed forward and feed now for the student. Okay, after this kind of looking back, so we can have some kind of interpretation of the score in the same test specification. So in the test specification, we need to look at the 3 things. The first one is going to be the competencies that we are going to measure. The second one is going to be the mastery cut-off point, the quantitative threshold that we need to base ourselves on. The final one, that is the way that we need to interpret it. Here is going to be the way that the test designer asks a teacher to find out enough evidence to make the conclusion for this. For example, this student need to achieve at least 8 points for the L1 competence, 12.5 points for R1 competence, 4 points for S1 competence, and recognize the form and the meaning of at least 4 words in order to bring enough evidence to say that he or she has already achieved the A1 level from the test. Okay, so the third thing that you have to refer yourself back in terms of test specification is that we have to look at the ways the test designer requires to interpret the score. Okay, and so you can see the example for the other one as well. So here is gonna be something that you are going to use and communicate the score meaning with the students themselves or with their parents. For example, here we say that for the first part of the test, the student achieved only 1 out of 5 correct answer. And if we go back to the previous one, we can say that, okay, this student haven't got the ability to recognize the specific information in some kind of conversation between the 2 native speakers when the speed of speaking is quite reasonable. Okay, so that is something that we need to report back to the parents as well, and the same holds true for the other section. And when you combine the information from all the section from the test, you can make the conclusion whether the student have already achieved the pre-A1 level or not. And if yes, what might be the evidence? If no, what might be the evidence? Okay, for example, here for the section number 2 and 3, I say yes. But for the section number 1, 4, and 3, I say no. 1 is yes, 4 and 3 is no. So what conclusion we can make about this kind of student? And for the yes answer, so I say that, okay, at this moment, the student can do A and B. And for something no, I say that the student cannot do D and E. So from that, we can come back and say that, okay, what areas that you need to work more on in order to improve your learning outcome. Okay, so that is a story that we need to tell the student about the score. Okay, so by and large, the first one, so we just look at the score. And we know that in our story, we need to cover 3 things on together: the score, the story, and what the student should do now, what the student should do in the future in order to improve learning. But in order to base yourself on this kind of story, we need to have some kind of evidence. And in order to elicit this kind of evidence, we have to look back at the test spec or the test plan. And the 3 things that we have to fasten your focus on. The first one is about the underlying competencies that you are measuring with the test. The second one is about the mastery cutoff point. Yeah, so we talk about the reasonable volume of the evidence that you need to collect in order to say that the student achieved a certain level. And finally, what might be some kind of combination, the ways that we need to interpret the score as a whole. And from that, we can have this kind of score report. And this is a score report that we need to use in order to communicate the meaning of the score to the student. And also we can base ourselves on this kind of score report in order to give some kind of feedback, feed now, and foot forward with the student. Okay, so that is the first story that we can tell from the score. That is a story about the language ability of a particular learner. Yeah. Any questions for the first story? Any questions for the first one? Okay, so if you have none, I move on with the second story. In the second story, we are going to talk about the story about the language ability of a group of the student. Yes, of course, when you score the test paper, you normally score for the whole class. Yeah, and here is going to be something that we can look at. I will give you some time to look at the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 indices over here. And you are going to work in your group and tell me, what do this kind of indices tell you? And why do we need this kind of indices? So in order to have an overview of the language ability of a given group of students, what is going to be the most important indices among the 9 indices over here? Yeah, okay. Yes, the first one, you need to work in group, identify the underlining concept of this kind of terms over here, underlining definition of the terms over here. And in order to have some kind of overviews about the language ability of a given group of learners, what might be the most important indices? Okay. So now I will send you to the breakout rooms and you have about 5 to 7 minutes to identify the meaning of this kind of indices over here. And after that, can you please select maybe 3 most important indices for me in order for us to cultivate an overview about the language ability of a group of students. Oops, sorry. Okay, so welcome back. And I do hope that you have already figured out the underlying meaning of those indices over here. Let's start with something very simple. The first group, the first group is going to be something very easy to understand. And is there anybody who can help me by explaining this kind of three concepts over here? And you can use example from the list of data that I have here, the list of numbers that I have here. Okay, so I may start with the first group. The first group we have Hải Hà, Tạ Ngọc Anh, Henry, Thu Hằng, Mỹ Phúc, and Minh Châu. So what does this mean for frequency, proportion, and percentage? And can you please illustrate this kind of three concept by using the data that are given at the bottom of the slide? So the first group. Hello, so who might be the presenter? Yeah, so they are the first easiest concepts to understand over here. And that is something that we need to do as a teacher. So I know for sure that most of you here have been a teacher of English as a foreign language for a while. And when you score the student test paper, of course, we need to demonstrate this kind of score in terms of frequency, proportion, and percentage. From that, we can have some kind of overview of the language ability. Or you just score it and send it the score back to the student without trying to understand the meaning of the score itself. Okay, so is there anybody who can tell me the meaning of the three first indices? Frequency, proportion, and percentage?
We can I try?
Yeah.
Miss Hồng Nhung, go on.
Yeah, so
You go.
We are in the same group, and Miss Hồng Nhung explained these three concepts very clearly for us, so we understand it. Like frequency is the times the score appear in the total correspondent. For example, I can see the scores here. There are 20 students took part in the test, right? Have the 20 numbers here, and for frequency, I can see that the student got 8. There are 2 students got 8. So the frequency of 8 here is 2 out of 20. So it got the proportion of 2 out of 20. So it is 1 out of 10, I think. And the percentage here will be 1 out of 10 multiple to 100%. It will be 10%. Is that correct?
You are right. Perfectly explained. Okay. Yeah, so it's gonna be, and percentage. You just multiply the proportion by 100%. Yeah. So you multiply by 100%. That is enough. Okay. So the frequency here is going to be the number of times that a number occurs and reoccurs again in the data set. For example, here in this kind of data set, the number 6, how many times the number 6 occurs in the data set?
One time.
One only.
Okay, only 1. So the frequency of 6 is only 1. Okay, and what about 11? Can you please help me with the 11?
3.
Okay, 3. Okay, so the frequency of 11 is 3. And in order to count the proportion, we just use the frequency and divided by the sample size. In this sample size here, I have 20 items on together, 20 numbers on together. So it's gonna be, for example, 3/20. It's gonna be the proportion for 11. And in order to come up with the percentage, I just multiply it with 100%. And that is the first one. Why do we need this one? Why do we need this one? Why do we need to identify the frequency, the proportion, and percentage? Yeah, so why do we need to identify the frequency? Okay, so why do we need to have this one? Yeah, for example, the frequencies of 6, it's gonna be 1. Yeah, so frequencies of 8. Yeah, it's gonna be 2. Yeah, so frequencies of 9. It's gonna be 2. For example, the frequencies of 10 is 2 as well, I guess. Yeah, frequencies of 11. So we have 3. Yeah, so the frequency of 12. Yeah, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 4. So frequency of 13. We have 1, 2, and 3 as well. Yeah, so frequency of 14. Yeah, so we have 1, 2, and frequency of 15. We have 1. Okay, so if you look at this kind of frequencies over here, what conclusion you can make? Yeah, if you look at the frequency and proportion percentage over here, what conclusion we can make? Why do we need this kind of indices over here? If we know that, yeah, the maximum score is gonna be 15. Yeah, the maximum score is gonna be 15. So what we can tell about this kind of group of students? Yeah, why do we need to have this kind of frequency? We need to have this kind of frequencies in order to see whether the difficulty levels of the test is going to be suitable for the students or not. Yeah, so we can see that the lowest point over here is going to be 6, and the highest point is going to be the maximum score is going to be 15. And the number of students who achieve here from here upwards, from with 30 from 12 upward is going to be quite a lot, and it counts for large number in the data set. And that is the reason why the test appear to be quite easy for the student, because most of the student can have a good point over here. Okay, and the student only one student is below the average point, and most of the other are above the average point. Is another thing that we talk about this one. So there are 2 scenarios. The first one, the test is too easy. The second scenario, the students are good enough. Okay, so if we have already validated that the test is well designed and is not too easy, so we can say that our group of students is good because they have already mastered all the required or all the measure competences in the test. Okay, so the frequency will give you an overview about the relationship between the difficulty levels of the test and the target abilities of the group of learner. Okay, so instead of looking at one single student, now we can have an overview about the target ability of the whole group. And the frequency is going to be the one that you often see in the chart, in the final chart, when you try to report the score to the student and try to report the score to the head of school, for example. In Vietnam, for example, after 1 year, one academic year, by the end of July or August, when the student have already finished their general examination, after they finish their grade 12, they need to take the general examination in order to receive the certificate for general education certificate. We have this kind of frequency map. So in Vietnamese, we can have something like phổ điểm. Sorry, Henry, that is going to be the same concept over here, but I would like to refer to Vietnamese because they formulate themselves with this kind of concept more. Phổ điểm is going to be something that we base on the frequency. So actually, we use the frequency to build up the frequency map. And with this kind of frequency map, we can see the distribution of the score across the spectrum from 0 to 10 score or to 15 score is up to the nature of the test. And by and large, this kind of 3 indices over here give you an overview of the student test performance, whether they perform very well or whether they perform very poorly on the given test. Okay, so as a teachers, after we have already scored the student paper, we need to build up the frequency map. And from that, we can have an overview of the language abilities of the group of learner. And from that, we can make some kind of inference about the quality of the student learning, as well as the qualities of our teaching as well. And now, I would like to go with the second group of 3 indices over here, mode, median, and mean. Yeah, mode, median, and mean. And what do they mean? And why do we need it? Yeah.
I just can understand like a little bit about the 3 of these. Like the mode is the score that you can find the most frequent in the list of the score. For example, in this example, we see that the mode is 11 because it happened 3 times.
12, I guess.
12. Yeah,
1,
I didn't see.
2, 3, 4. Yeah, okay. So the mode is 12. Yeah, because that is the most popular number. You are right. Very good. Thank you. And what about the other one?
I'm not sure about the median, but the mean can be counted by we use the sum of the older score and divide it by the number of the score. So we got the mean.
Yeah. So the mean actually is going to be the average. Yeah. So the mean is the average. Yeah. So you sum them up. Yeah. You sum all the number up and divide it by 20. And after that, you have the mean. Okay. And the next one, the median, is going to be the number that divide the data sets into 2 halves. Into 2 halves. For example, if I arrange, if you come back, if you give a closer look at the chat box. Yeah. Okay. So we have 1 student got 6, 2 students got 8, 2 students got 9, and 2 students got 10. 3 students got 11, right? Because we have 1 student got 6, so we have 1. 2 students got 8, so we have 2, so we have 3 of them already. 2 students got 9, so we have 5. 2 students got 10, so we have 7. And we have 3 students got 11, so we have 10 students. Yeah, so the median is gonna be somewhere between 11 and 12, because this point divides the group into 2 halves. because we have 20 students. Yeah, we have 20 students. So if we take 11.5 is a median. Yeah, so we have 10 students below this median, and we have another 10 median above. Another 10 student above this median. So median is gonna be the cutoff point that divides the data set into 2 equal half. Yeah, so below it, we have 1/2, and above it, we have another half. Yeah. Okay, so why do we need this kind of 3 indices over here? Most is gonna be the most popular number. So in this case, mode is 12. And the median is gonna be 11.5. And the average, who can have some kind of quick mind to calculate this kind of average for me? What is the mean? Yeah, who can calculate the mean for me this time? It's going to be quite quick, right? Yeah. Okay, so how much do we have for the mean? And what is the mean over here? Yeah, what is the means over here? Who can do it for me?
It's 11.15.
11.15. Thank you, Mike. You did a good job. Okay, so by comparing this kind of 3 indices over here, we're gonna see that, yeah, the mean is smaller than the mode. Yeah, the mode is gonna be the most popular number. It means that many students got this kind of score. And in this case, the mean is smaller than the mode. What conclusion we can make about this group of students? Yeah.
Can it be inferred that they did a good job?
Very
by
good. Yeah, because so many students achieve higher than the mean, and that is the reason why we have 2 possibilities over here. The first one, the students are actually very strong, and the second one, the test might be quite easy for them. Yeah, so that is the reason why we can compare between and cross different smaller groups in this one. So if the frequency give you an overview of the test score, so the group number 2, mean, mode, and median, we can talk more about it. We can divide the student into different groups, the strong group, the moderate group, and the weak group. And we can see that in this kind of test, yes, the strong group include many students because the mode is higher than the mean. So many students achieve higher score than the mean, and that is the reason why we can make 2 implications, 2 assumptions. The first one, the students are very strong, and the second one, the test is quite easy. And if we are able to validate the fact that the test is not easy, so we say that the students are strong enough. Okay, so that is about the ways that we use the second set of indices to classify the student into different kind of levels. And normally we use 3 different 3 indices over here. 3 indices over here. By compare and contrast between and among the 3 indices over here, we're gonna see that this group is very strong and they perform very well on the test. Okay, and now, what about the range? What about the range, variance, and standard deviation? Yeah. Anybody who knows about this kind of 3 concepts? This one is the most challenging one. And this one will tell us more about the distance from one student to another student. Yeah. Okay, the range is going to be quite easy. The range is going to be the distance from the smallest number to the largest number in the set of data. Now, for example, in this set of data over here, what is the smallest point? Yeah, what is the smallest number? Sorry, 6. Okay, you're right. Okay, what is the largest number? 15. Okay, so the range is gonna be 15 minus 6. So we have the range of 9. Okay, or you just say that the range of the test is go from 6 to 15. That is enough. Yeah, so actually the range is gonna be the distance of the lowest number to the highest number. We need to know about it to see, yeah, what is the overall pictures of the score first, before we go deeper to see the distance between the students themselves to the mean. Okay, and what about the variance? Yeah. What about the variance? Okay, so for example, after the test, you are going to you would like to divide the group of students into maybe 5 levels. Yeah, the first one, weak. The second one, below mean, below average. Average. Strong. And excellent. Okay, so if you like to divide the student in 5 groups like this one, how can you divide them? Which student is supposed to be weak? Which student is supposed to be below the average? Which student is gonna be around the average? Which student is strong and which student is excellent? How can you do that? Okay. So you ask the teachers already, and you need to analyze this kind of data every year. Yeah, at least maybe 2 or 3 times. Okay, so the average is gonna be the mean. Yes, the average is gonna be the mean. So anyone with the mean score, and in this case, the mean score is 11.15. Anyone with this kind of mean score, yeah, can be allocated for average group. Okay, so anyone that is 1 standard deviation below the average is gonna be below average. And anyone with a 2 standard deviation below the average is gonna be weak. Anyone that is 1 standard deviation above the average is going to be strong. And anyone who has 2 standard deviation away or above the average is going to be the excellent student. Okay, so that is a way that we are going to use a set of data in order to divide them into 5 different groups. So what does this mean for standard deviation? Yeah, so standard deviation is going to be the distance between, okay, I would like to start with the variance first before I come with the variance with the standard deviation. So variance is going to be the distance between a particular score to the mean. Yeah, so student A gets 6. Okay, so student A gets 6 points on the test. What is the variance between his and the mean? His performance and the mean?
So 5.5.
Yeah, 5.5. Very good. 5.15, I guess. Yeah, so that is going to be the distance between his true score and the mean. And you do the same for all the other. And after that, you are going to square root the mean of variance, of all variances. You have the standard deviation. Yeah, you have the standard deviation. Yeah, so for any student who has one standard deviation below the mean, so this student can be labeled as below the average. And if his score has about 2 standard deviation below the mean, so he is supposed to be the weak student. And for any student who has a score with 1 standard deviation above the mean, he is supposed to be strong. And for those who has the excellent score, it means that his score has 2 standard deviation, above the average. So he is supposed to be excellent. Okay, so in Vietnam, we normally give this kind of division based on some kind of regulation already, but it's not some kind of things that come up from the real data. So when we try to divide the student ability into different kind of levels like this one, based on their true score, so we have to base on these 3 indices. Okay, yeah. So having that said, if you look closer at the data set, based on the score just a student have already got from the test, you can have an overview of their performance based on the frequency. And based on the comparison between mode and mean, you will see the difficulty level of the test. And the final one, you can see how the ability is spread over the spectrum of the scale, away from the central point, away from the mean. Why do we need to have this one? Yeah, so now another application of this kind of indices over here. For example, in this semester, I am going to experiment a new with using a new method, or to be more precise, a new teaching method. And I try to carry out this kind of experiment with 2 groups. Okay, 7A is gonna be the experiment group. And 7B is gonna be the control group. Yeah, so the new teaching method is gonna be applied for 7A, but not 7B. The student in the group 7B follow the same teaching and learning procedure as a conventional one. Okay, by the end of the study period, I use a test to measure the outcome. The mean of the first group of 7A is 11.3, and the standard deviation is gonna be 2.4, and the mean of 7B is gonna be 11.0, and the standard deviation is 0.9. Okay, what conclusion can I make about the efficacy of the teaching method beyond this one? So the mean and standard deviation. Yeah, what conclusion we can make about it? Phương Liên, you are right. the standard deviation is the standard deviation is going to be the mean of the square root of the mean of the variance. And the variance is going to be the distance between a particular score to the mean. Yeah, Phương Liên. It's going to be the other way around. The variance is going to be the distance from a particular score to the mean. And standard deviation is going to be the square root of the mean of all the variances.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, more than welcome. And yeah, so with the above examples, I have two groups. Yeah, so can I make a conclusion that the new teaching method is very effective? Yeah. So for example, this semester, you are going to experiment, to carry out an experiment with a new teaching method. And you apply this kind of new teaching method with one group 7A. And I call this group as experiment group. And group 7B is a control group. And by the end of the semester, I use a test to score their language proficiency. And the group 7A has a mean score is 11.3 and standard deviation is 2.4. And the second one, the group 7B, the mean is 11 sharply, and the standard deviation is 0.9. What conclusion we can make from this? Yeah, if we look from the mean only, so of course, 7A perform better than 7B. So can I conclude that the new teaching method is better than the conventional one? Yeah, can I conclude that way? Can I be able to?
Yeah, mention my opinion.
Yeah.
Okay, so as I can see here, although the mean may be higher, however, the standard deviation is much higher as well. So it means that there are more students getting lower scores, and maybe the range of scores has been expanded.
Yeah,
so
very good.
Right. It may be a challenging problem for the teachers because students will have both higher and lower scores, and I don't know, but that's really difficult. That's a very difficult situation for teachers.
Okay, so the situation now is quite clear. If we take the standard deviation into account, Mike, you are right. The standard deviation of the score for 7A is far higher than the 7B. So it has already said that some students score very high and why many other students score low. But because there are few students who score very high, when it comes to the mean, it has already equalized the effect of the teaching method. And when you carry out some kind of statistic computation, you're going to see that there are no significant differences between the two groups here in terms of the final test outcome. And from that, I can say that the new teaching method, it just has the same effects as the conventional one. Yeah, so we expect that the new teaching method can fare better, can perform better than the conventional one. So from next year, we can multiply this kind of method for many other groups. But if you just look at only the mean, you're gonna make some kind of wrong decision. You are going to make some kind of wrong conclusion, because even though the mean of the group 7A is higher than the mean of group number B, but the standard deviation is also larger. And as I said, the standard deviation will show you the distance between one student to another. So when you have a high standard deviation, it means that some students are very strong and some students are very weak. And because of the few strong students who get the highest mark, so this kind of high mark, when it combined to the low marks of the majorities of the student, it's come out with a higher mean. But this kind of mean is attributed more or contributed more from the strong student, but not from the majority. So from this kind of comparison, from this kind of situation over here, you're gonna see that the combination of mean and standard deviation help you to compare the performance of one group of students to another. If we just focus on the mean, of course, you can give some kind of wrong picture about the language ability of the two or more group of students. Only when you combine the mean and standard deviation together, you can make the conclusion whether group A better perform or outperform the group B or vice versa. Okay, so with this kind of 9 indices over here, I have already unpacked the story that you can figure out from this kind of data over here. If you have a list of different kind of score or grades from the student, this kind of score and grade tell you a lot about the relationship between the student, the relationship between a group of students with another group of students, the relationship between this group of students with your teaching method. Okay, so we have many stories that normally made implicit behind the number. So here, the number can tell you a lot of story if you know how to analyze them. Okay. Any questions that you may have? I'm sorry. Ooh. Yeah. So we have already told the story about the language ability of a particular student. And now we have used this kind of 9 indices to unpack the story about the language ability of a group of students or different groups of students altogether. Yeah, so this kind of thing I use in order to compare and contrast between the students and between different group of students, and also to